The city of Santa Ana was incorporated in 1886. The citrus industry was the number 2 industry after oil, gas, and gasoline. During those times, housing segregation, educational segregation, and maintaining a low-wage labor force were critical to the growth of the agricultural industry. Segregation played a driving force in ensuring the low-wage labor force. Logan was such a neighborhood who were part of that labor force lived in one of the few places where they can purchase their own homes. The citrus industry declined during the time of World War II. It's a January morning, Saturday. We take a walk to HHC Roasters. My Uncle Pete, my dad, Lena Luna, and Eddie Sanchez. This is a story of the Logan Barrio and a call for the Logan Barrio recognition in American history, and a woman who fought and spoke up for Logan Barrio, Josephine Chepa Andrade.
My mom was an activist in her community, used to help people all the time. People would come to Logan, and we had these big avocado trees. And people who didn't know how to speak English or how to fill out a form of some kind, she would tell them, "Oh, come, sit under the tree." And there would be a bench and some chairs and stuff, and she would fill out their forms so that way they could take the form back wherever, either a doctor form or insurance forms, whatever it was, because they knew they didn't know how to fill out a form. There was some Jesuit priests that came by, and I guess in order for you to know what is happening in your community, you have to go to City Hall and go to a meeting. And apparently someone got a hold of this priest or these priests and told them what was happening or what was going to happen to Logan. And he came by and he told my mother that they were going to put a freeway through Logan. They were going to take all of Logan, put a freeway through Logan, and Logan would not exist. It was going to come all the way to Civic Center. Well, it's Stafford Street,
right,
which now is considered Santa Ana Boulevard.
Exactly.
Santa Ana. Okay. So anyway, he came, spoke to my mother, and then my mom started listening and she became interested in it, and she said, how am I going to do this? I don't understand how to do it. And they explained to her what she had to do, how she had to go to City Hall with them. They would guide her, and they would have meetings and townhouse meetings and help her out. So she said, okay. And she came around to everybody in the neighborhood. And of course, some people are willing to participate, and then you have people that are not that interested because they say, I'm moving anyway, I don't care. But my mother did care, and so she pushed. My nieces, my nephews, they were all smaller. And they would go to the school. They would go and get, people that went to school with them because there was a lot of kids here. I think it has to do that we're trying to keep the neighborhood and the community alive. We don't want it to fade away because that's what happens.
Right.
The community fades because someone is left to carry the ball. And sometimes it's very hard for one person to maneuver everything. So you always need assistance.
Right.
Like,
yes.
For instance, my mother had Sammy Romero, and she also had Helen Moraga to kind of not really push her, but to help with the community. And I think, with the help of everybody, not just those people, but the help of the community, that I think helped my mom get into the mood, which then they started to have a reunion. And I joined the reunion because the reunion committee, because my mother had said to me, I want you, I'm the oldest of our family. And she said, I want you to go with me to the reunion and help out. And I thought to myself, oh Lord, here we go. All right, so what do you do? So I went to a meeting and I listened in on how things were happening and how the city would, help out with certain items and stuff like that. And they were older people at the time, and my mom said, no, you need to come so that way you can keep it up. You can take it from there. And I said, okay. My mom was tough. So I guess we're all strong because we come from a strong family. In the last reunion, I had a lot of people, a lot of younger people, they're probably in their 30s, 40s, that came up to me and said, next year, call me, I want to help. And I said, great. And I will call them. I will call whoever asked to be called because I want them to get involved, even though they don't live here anymore. They moved on, but yet they want to come back and they want to see the neighborhood get together again. They want to see people that they haven't seen in a long time. Always happens on September, and it's always the last Saturday of September. If you really try, or if you really want something, don't just, okay. No, go at it and get it. If that's what you want to do, then do it. There's no stopping you, regardless of who's going to help you and who's not going to help you. If you want it, do it. You can do it. Like I said, my mother did it with kids, carrying signs, picketing and whatever. They were kids, and she got them in there. They were there. Then she'd say, okay, come on, we're walking from here all the way to City Hall. They'd all get, okay, they all got their little sign, and they'd follow my mother. So I think that my mother leaves us with the idea of, if you want it, don't just say it, do it. In the city of Santa Ana, my mother has the day that was her birthday, and that the city of Santa Ana has declared, I don't want to say a holiday, but like a day of recognition. And she also has a day of recognition for what they did was when she died, she has a day of recognition. The park that has my mother's name now, hopefully they can make Logan a historical place and the park a historical place where no one can touch it, no one can do anything with it, and it is recognized. And in the future, our kids can tell their friends, hey, I come from Logan. And then those kids might say, you know what? my grandma lived on Logan, or my great grandmother lived on Logan. And then they'll be a little bit more interested in, hey, what's Logan? Why is it historical? Why is it this? And maybe they will read, oh yeah, you know, Chepa was an activist for Logan, and this is why Logan is still there. Because she pushed and shoved and did what she had to do to get her point across that the Logan neighborhood is something. There's one thing that I have that I'd like to say is that I wish my mother was still here so that she could cook for us. Because you don't know how many people ask me, or when we talk about my mother, they say, I wish your mother was still here to make mole. I wish your mother was still here to make barbecue. I wish your mother was still here to make oatmeal chocolate chip walnut cookies.
Somewhere up north someplace, they had some Catholic priests, Jesuits, and they were trying to pick a city where the poor people could fight for themselves or have whatever they needed. And it's either between Anaheim and Santa Ana. Some of it also was in Delhi a little bit, but mainly it was the Logan neighborhood. And the big fight was the city had zoned it business. And what that meant that they did come in, anybody would buy the property to create some kind of a business. And so the only way the Logan neighborhood could exist itself as a neighborhood was to change from an M2, I believe it was, to an R2. It was manufacturing, whatever it was. I can't remember. It was too long ago. Exactly. So they sent me up to Jacksonville, Florida. And of course, it was new to me how a little guy for a poor neighborhood would have any political power. Okay? And the only way the city could, the neighborhood could exist, you had to change it into an R2, residential. So I learned enough to fight for that, but we were able to do that, have Logan as a residential area and stop it from being, if you look at Civic Center Drive and 17th and Lincoln, that splits the neighborhood, right? Exactly. That's what they had in the mind. So we blocked that, and Logan exists as you see it now. I was sent to Seattle, Washington, I think it was, and they sent me there, and the Jesuits would go through what they wanted to accomplish, which really something new for me, going to Seattle, being flying in by like a big wheel, and I caught on what was going on and trying to remember growing up in the Logan neighborhood, which it's a long time ago, but we spent a lot of times. I remember I lived on Lincoln Street, and you're facing the railroad tracks, and the other side was like if I remember, I think there were walnut groves, or it was factory. A farmer type of a deal, and we loved it because we could go play cowboys inside between the trees. And the funny part that I really remember, we're playing all the kids, combat or whatever it was, and we had a couple of shovels, and we took that to the orchard, and we're digging up foxholes. And the owner sees these big holes there, and he just chased us out of there so fast because we were playing war, you might say.
Right.
Quite a fun time. Exactly. You remember back and say, wow, that day we were kids, but it was something new to us. You come from a poor neighborhood, your family is poor, but giving you a little bit of political power. And thank God the Jesuit priest entered my head you have certain rights. So I became an animal, you might say. Logan Neighborhood Historical, that came out of that. And we were able to accomplish, and that is to save what you see that is a Logan neighborhood. We had people like Chepa Andrade. Have you ever heard that name before?
Yes, Chepa Park.
Chepa Andrade.
Yes.
Remember, I was no longer living in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Been a long time. They just pulled me out of where I was living at, which is way down in southwest Santa Ana. But they called me, and then I really got some thinking that you do have certain rights, okay?
Right.
And most of the people don't know. And so the Jesuit priest taught me how the rights that you have as a resident, as a human being, that not that I'm bragging, I think it taught me quite a bit.
I think since I was very young, I always was proud of my family and proud of where I was born. And, my mother said, never forget where you come from. So I was always, even after, I would always say, oh, my kids would say, why do you always talk about Logan? You don't even live there anymore, after I got married. So I thought, I don't know, it's so like I could just remember so many things. And it was actually a very happy childhood. There was times, of course, I would complain about things, but it was actually a happy childhood. I always felt a deep feeling toward the barrio. And so I always would, anything I could clip out of the paper or see anything about Logan, I would clip it out, throughout the years. And so when I retired, my grandchildren said, now the time to write your book about Logan. And then my littlest granddaughter, she said, what gave you inspiration to write the book? And I said, you did, because I want you to know, because you'll never know the history of your family here, unless somebody tells you. So I want you and everybody else to know, how we were then and how grateful we are. So that was the inspiration. I think what I found surprising is that there was so much documentation out there, especially after I read Elizabeth Hatt's book, and that somebody, especially Elizabeth Hatt, took the time when there were no computers, no internet, to do everything, go through the census and the directories and everything to get her numbers, correctly. And not only about Logan, but some of the other barrios in Santana. So I found that very surprising. And then, when we started having the reunions, I would do a little pamphlet just to pass out at the reunion. So the Santa Ana Historical Society heard about it, and they asked me if I would write a book that they would pay for it and publish it and everything, because I didn't know how to get a book together. So they did, and I really never got any money for it, and I didn't care because I just wanted it written and so that it could be passed on. That's what got me to write the book. So there was a lot of stories when I was out interviewing some of the people. Thank God for the reunion, because I lived on Lincoln Street, and I had 60 first cousins living around the barrio there in Logan. And I kind of would be like in the middle of the ages, there was some older and some younger than me. So, and I was always home with my grandmother, so I kind of knew all the relatives that I had. They would let us out only to go to Valdivia's to the store. Okay, you can't go to school unless you ask for permission. And I did go to the Logan School, Mexican school, and I did go then to St. Joseph's School. So we were really protected, or I was. They wouldn't let me out of the house. So I didn't really know that many people as my brother did, because of course the boys, they could go any place. And I did know some because of my cousins, So when I started interviewing people, some of the names came to me. I could hear my aunts and uncle talking about them. And then when I heard their backgrounds, that was so inspiration to me, because they all had a pride. And in living and being from here. And they really didn't get help like the help that's around now, for people. No kind of housing, no kind of, free meals, or they worked hard. They were mostly laborers, and the kids even worked hard. I picked walnuts, I remember, with my grandfather. When I was 14, I went to pack oranges. Every summer I'd go with my mother to the packing house. So talking to these people, I saw that we all kind of had that same common bond. Like, we went to the same church. We went to the same schools. We walked the same street all the way to 4th Street because that's where the stores were at. And a lot of them worked at the same place. And so even afterwards, my grandparents sometimes would go to have a party over there in Colonia Juarez because she had a compadre that used to live in Logan and had moved to Colonia Juarez, so they went over there and vice versa. So a lot of these people knew each other from the different barrios at the time. When I wrote these stories, there were so many stories and each one was so inspiring. The pictures were so great. Well, here is the book. I want to point out that you think that the cell phone users of today are talking about cell phone. This is Mr. Laguna, who must have been, that would have been Cecilia's grandfather, my tío. And he had a phone, I'm talking on to. So that is Mr. Laguna. And then here is Mr. Parga on his old car. And then most of these are my cousins, except for this one. I think she's Parga.
Yes.
She's a Parga. But I'm there and some of my cousins. And then this one down here was cut. It was a panoramic photo made in 1932 at what was then Sycamore Flats, Green River, because the church, Our Lady of Guadalupe, they would have their picnics there at the Green River. And you could see all these old people, they were mold. Now I'm old. And then there was another photo that was taken in Birch Park at the time in 1913. And my family is in there and a lot of the families from Logan and part of Santana, where they would go to celebrate the 16th of September. So that was my inspiration. And you can see the wall, the Veterans Wall. A lot of the younger generation went off to war. I mean, a lot of them volunteered. They didn't force them, And it was more than one in a family because the families were large. So they had a lot of boys and they all went. And I remember Helen Parga told me a story of how my cousin Richard was going overseas. So they decided to throw him a party. And somebody had a jukebox. So they pushed it. Her and Richard pushed the jukebox down the street. I don't know where they were having the party. Maybe in the street. Because they were closed off the street to have the parties. So that was a very nice story. I thought, that it must have been so much fun because going through at that time, except it wasn't fun fighting in the war. So then there's a lot of people that came from the barrio that did good. I remember somebody used to tell me, "Ay, los de la Logan matan." And I go, "They do? I never knew that. I didn't know they killed." And now you see, and we had the first Hispanic judge, Judge Perez, who also used to own the local pool hall. The trellis is still there on Logan. And there was a lot of people who came from these humble belongings and made themselves something, because their parents worked hard. They worked hard. I wanted to write down as many stories and where they came from and why they came. And a lot of them came from the same states and had relatives or friends here. So I think that's how a lot of them survived. They first built the streets here was because the trains were coming, and they knew most of these lots were made big because they thought it was all going to be industrial. So there was some buildings, some businesses, but then because of the Huntington fight with railroads, it didn't come through like they planned, and it ended up in residential, the Europeans moving out and the Mexicans moving in. And at first, most of them rented because they couldn't buy. But I know, for instance, my grandfather came in from New Mexico, like a lot of other families that came in from the mining towns. Because they didn't want to work in mining anymore and didn't want their kids to be in mining anymore. So they brought them down here and they could work out in the fresh air. And whatever job they could take. I remember my grandfather talking about Minter, Mr. Minter, and like a dream I could remember him seeing him with big overalls, Mr. Minter, and there was another one, and I can't remember his name. They would talk about them, and they were the big bosses. They had agriculture, where they would just cross the street to go pick oranges or go pick tomatoes. And your mother used to go pick, I don't know what it was, tomatoes or something, right across the street. She would just jump on the railroad, off the rail tracks, and then Sylvia would bring the babies to her when they had to be fed. So they were close by. It was because it was a commodity. It was easy because the jobs are close by. And at first, the orange packing house was just for European white. But then later, they got other jobs. So a lot of the Mexicans started doing packing. And they started taking over the packing houses. And the big one that we would work from out of here, almost all the ladies in the community that I knew, they all worked at Francis Citrus. And Frances was the name of Mr. Irvine's wife, that he named that after her. So they worked there at the packing house, and in the orange house and the lemon house. So they had those jobs. I remember my grandfather also working in the road. And one time my cousin, who was older than me, and he told me that he remembers my grandfather taking him to work to cut leña. Because my grandfather would go to orchards that had been cut down and pick up the wood that they just left there. Then he would bring it and he would cut it out, and then he would sell the wood to the Logan residents and whoever needed leña for their firewood, because a lot of us didn't have, the regular stoves that we do nowadays. So that was whatever they could take, they worked it. And then of course the orange was only seasonal. So when it wasn't the oranges, my mother would come home smelling like walnuts, because she worked at the Rosenberg where the ladies would go and grade the walnuts. So there was always something, sewing. A lot of them did sewing also. My Aunt Nellie, which would be Cecilia's grandmother, she worked for Mrs. Waffle, cleaning house for her and ironing. The Waffle House, the Santa Ana Waffle House, the historical, that she worked there cleaning house for her. And then they would mention how that doctor was so nice. She was not afraid to come to Logan, because a lot of doctors would not come into Logan because it was Mexican and we were contaminated. But she was one of the doctors that did. And so did Dr. Ray. Dr. Ray was a great doctor. I vaguely remember him. But they survived like they could wherever they could. Not very many were able to go through school, to high school, because they had to go work, like whether the pickings was here or they had to go up north to go pick up north. And the whole families would take off with the kids, and all the kids would do picking, whether they're apricots or almonds. I never went, but I remember I could hardly wait till my cousins and my uncle came home, because they would come with crates of almendras and chabacanes and anything that they had worked on there, they would bring home. And I hated buying oranges. I mean, when I had to buy oranges, like, oh my God, I never had to buy an orange. It was so, everybody brought oranges home that worked in the packing houses, we survived. So those are kind of the main things that they worked at.
And speaking about from day-to-day life in Logan, was basically the mother stayed home, took care of the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and the fathers went out and worked. But also, you mentioned they worked at the packing house,
And
so really it was a family affair. They had to.
yeah,
Both couples had to. Both.
and especially when the war came, the ladies went to work because a lot of the men were off to war. So that kind of started the women going to work. And then afterwards, they had to kind of both go to work because things were getting more expensive. But, and they just, worked. Like my aunts, they worked at McDonnell Douglas on the airplanes, making the airplanes for the war. And a lot of the ladies from Logan did too. So it did change. And when they came back to the war, they felt, okay, we earned it. And then there was, we can buy our own home. We can go work someplace else. We can work into construction. We supposedly were one of the first, if not the first. And I was in an organization where we went out and found out how many barrios there was actually in Orange County, and a lot of them just, they died away, and they were moved away or they were trampled away. And Logan was one of the first ones that you could come and live here with a relative or rent a house, or I guess just find your job from here and then move to other places. But this was like a jumping point for them, and that's why they knew so many people afterwards throughout Orange County, all the Mexican Americans that hanged around. So yes, it's definitely for the community to know, that we're here and we're still here, and also for our kids and their kids to know, things didn't come that easy and they worked hard, but and it came to be that now they're benefiting from what our ancestors worked here for. In my mind, it's always been a historical place. And I see a lot of people who are still keeping it like you, and you to try to keep up that we have to remember, where we came from. And it wasn't easy, like as easy as it is now. And there was a lot more prejudice then than there is now. Well, now it's kind of almost hidden. Some of the stories that I picked up from the people, when I was interviewing them, and the history that they told us and the racism, that came in, like a lot of people that came, they didn't know how to read or write, until they got here. And I know my grandfather did, and my grandmother showed him, and he became a citizen when he was already in his 60s. And then they didn't have it in English and in Spanish. And I was told one story of one lady where her brother went off to the Korean War, and her dad was working in the picking oranges. And one day these men came and they told him to sign this paper because they were here to help them to get better wages. And so he signed it, and what he signed was a paper that said that he was a communist. And he didn't know that. And so they threw him back to Mexico. And so it took years for them to fight to get him back and to prove that he did not even know how to read or write. And I do want to note one fraction of a community that hasn't been hit on too much. I think it's the Flores family, which still live here in Logan. And the mother, she was from Capistrano. They were American Indians, actual American Indians. So that would be a story to follow through, that there were American Indians here. There was a family here from the Peralta families, from the owned land grants. They came to live here too.
When did you start to see industry starting to move into Logan?
Well, there was light industry already because it was commercialized, semi. But when they knocked the building down between Logan School and Saldivar's house, there was a residence there. When they knocked that down, they put a commercial building up there. They did newspaper recycling and stuff. That was the first one really nearby. Then across the street, when they tore another house down, they built a commercial fire extinguisher repair business. Those were the first ones there that I remember. And that was early. That was, like I said, in the 60s, early 60s.
So you could see right off the bat that there was some changes happening from
Right.
residential.
When the buildings came down, the commercial buildings went up.
What did the city want to do with Logan at that point?
Well, at the time, we just lived there. But we found out later that they wanted to do a more commercialization. Like I said, when the residents came down, they didn't build new residents at the time. Okay, they put commercial buildings. They did the same thing at the corner of Washington and Logan. There was a big mansion house there. When they took that down, the residents cabinets moved in there. So, like I said, when they took houses down, they didn't rebuild homes. They put businesses in there.
Relationships.
Yeah, and a lot of them were between marriages. People they had a tendency to live together. The homes, remember they were built individually homes. They weren't. It wasn't a tract home. Before it closed down, the Southern Pacific, they were the circus would stop there every year. There was a layover.
Interesting.
Circus, and we'd go down there and they'd let us, no biggie. We'd go down there and watch the lions, and elephants, giraffes, talk to the clowns, the people down there.
The bologna ends over at Lujan's.
Oh yeah. Well, Lujan's store, Mr. Lujan, they sold meat, and I tell you, very strange. So with the bologna, they said bologna, big rolls of bologna, and he'd sell the slices. Everybody had them for sandwiches, for burrito. We cook them, with everything,
Sounds
potatoes, better than cheaper than couldn't afford ground beef and all that stuff. Very, money was very tight. So we go get the bologna and Mr. Lujan, the ends of the bologna, he would come by. He actually would sell sometimes. I remember, like for a nickel, a couple of cents, a couple of pennies or something, just to get some money, make it look like official. But most of them would just give it away. And I remember a couple of times, me and Frank went down. My brother John went down there, and he says, "Do you get any ends?" And he said, "Oh yeah." And I know darn well he gave us the meat. And he knew we probably might have been hungry for one day. Hungry look, right? Like the little rascals. And he gets one thing, gave us a big chunk on there. I said, "Oh my God, man, he was
He's a very generous man.
Oh, he was. I'll tell you, he was salt of the earth, man. That Mr. Lujan.
55 years. It was 1949 when my parents got married. My dad was a handsome young 19-year-old, and my mom was a beautiful young lady, only 15 years of age. They had their wedding at a church near Grand Avenue by my mom's neighborhood where she lived and grew up, the Mexican barrio of Logan in Santa Ana. They had their honeymoon at a hotel in the area. Together, they saved and bought a house on Hickory Street in Santa Ana where they raised their 7 children, working hard every day to make sure they gave them the necessities that would keep them happy kids.
This is the Alvarado family there. We're getting there now.
We're going through historical Logan right now. This is part of the school right here.
The end of this wall here.
Here's the ballpark, the playing field.
Right here?
The playing field, yeah, went all the way up to here. Right here, this part right here was a playground. The basketball court was right here. Right here was the end of the school.
The place called home, only look forward, no longer alone.
Here's where where the white people live, by the way, Caucasians. No Latinos live out here at all. That joint I tried to rent over here that wouldn't rent to me in this 1963.
There wasn't supposed to be, but there was.
Yeah. And that's a Catholic church, St. Joseph. At one time, this was for all white people. Even though we lived in Logan,
Segregated
right
church.
we lived in Logan there. This we couldn't even go to this church at one time.
Went to the Guadalupe on Fifth.
Guadalupe, yeah, we went to Guadalupe. We went all the way down to 3rd Street
Oh, 3rd Street, I mean.
to the Mexican church. They called it.
La Chiquita grocery. This used to be the park. I have a picture of me at the house playing marbles right there in the dirt.
Only look for a world no longer alone.
This is the avocado tree. That we used to get. Larry Parker used to live in a house before he took it out and rebuilt it. See the big building there? It's been there forever also. This must have been built like in the 30s. Tejas lived here in the 50s. Okay, the Tejas family. There's a memorial pictures. Because I know a lot of you guys passed away. Victor Arzate right here.
Yeah,
I guess he got a medal. Remember, there's Victor right there.
Yeah, Victor.
The one that used to live on 6th Street?
Right. Cruise Reels. I remember he used to go by the house on Townsend.
Yeah, Cruise Reels.
I think
he's the one that had the band.
our Uncle Henry and him were good friends.
Yeah, he was one of the first guys from the Domino's cart club.
This guy looks familiar. Yeah, I picked oranges with him. Oh no. He's my dad's best friend. And of course I picked oranges with him and my dad.
So you noticed it right away.
Yeah, I recognize him.
Back.
Another door opens, looking inside, looking inside.